What is up, Tyler? First of all, well, two first of alls. You have the appropriate amount of calf tattoos, according to Drew Gibson, on one leg. The other leg might be holding you back. Um, but seriously, super cool. Love calf tattoos. But second, and more importantly, if that's your driveway, I am so jealous that you can throw out of your driveway. That's awesome. Very cool. Okay, so let's jump into it. Nice job on the filming. First thing, footwork, as usual. So everything looks good until the X. Boom. So that is, we have this tendency as humans and new players to want to keep our steps in cadence, to go initial step, X step, plant step, all in the same timing. And you really want more of a stagger. Philo talks about this with the phrase apple pie, like 1-2-1, and the 1-2-1 is what Coach T from Slingshot says. So you really want the initial step and the X step to be bop bop right next to each other, and then a delay, and then the plant step. So I'll demo that for you before I get too carried away and forget what I'm talking about. But them being even makes this X step too long, which makes it turn too far backwards, which then aligns your whole body to backwards. And like you end up in the right position, but you're there too early. So you're at your peak reach back here and your foot isn't down yet. And so then as you drift forward into the plant, the disc curls away from the camera. That's something that I'm going to start calling disc drift. So that's an issue. So let's flip over to demo mode and go over that. See, I already talked too much and I forgot the first thing I was going to say. So let's find out what I was going to say. Cadence and placement and how that affects timing. All the things. Okay. So your cadence is 1-2-3, right? 1-2-3. And we want 2 and 3 to be different. So we're going to take 2 and 3 and we're going to smush them closer to 1. So it's going to be 1-2. This is the new thing I'm trying for coaching X step. So I'm putting my shin bone into my calf so that I cannot go too far, right? So here, boom, toes pointed towards the camera still. So that's 1-2. 1-2, 3, right? And I'm not ending up on top of 3. I'm trying to stay on 2. So 1-2, trying to stay on 2, stay on 2, stay on 2, and then shift into 3, right? So my toe is farther away from the camera, from the target, than my heel when my heel lands. So to get in the good light in 90, I'm not 90. I'm heel forward of 90. So that's cadence. Make sure it's 1-2-3. And then just changing the length of the X step. The X step only turns toes backwards when it has to go too far. If I go all the way over here, I'm not going to point forwards, right? I'm going to turn this way. And now everything's not good. So you'll see this in yourself on the back angle really well. So back angle. When I turn this foot backwards, as I shift weight onto that foot, my hips are going to align with that foot and my shoulders are going to align with that foot. And then my reach back is going to peak before this foot is on the ground. So you want your reach back to peak, boom, when your heel comes down, because that's what actually starts the turn. So you want to be reaching backwards until the turn starts. Okay, so that's that. Moving on from there. So that's all connected to your X step. yours is too long and gets too far toe backwards, so I want you to make it tighter. Keep your legs together. Like, try to put your feet side by side, and that affects your timing, and it affects where your body aligns. So next thing we're going to do to influence your timing is we're going to change your pump. So watch Paul Macbeth if you want to emulate someone on a good pump. So the new rule is the disc is tied to your rear foot until your plant step is in motion, and then it's going to switch feet. So as the X step comes forward, we need the disc to be coming forward, and they're both going to peak at the same time. So your X step is going to get to over here, but remember, now we want it to end up actually right here. So when the X step ends up here, the disc will end up out here. So you're going to pump your arm all the way out to there. You're going to swing your X step behind you to there. I'll demo that again before we get too carried away. Your X step goes too far, and then as soon as your X step is down, the disc starts moving backwards away from your chest. So your reach back is going to peak too early. There, your reach back is peaked. Your disc has started to drift away from the camera, which is moving you towards rounding, towards collapsing your front shoulder. We'll go over that too. And then you're striding out, looks really good. Oh crap, the toe started to open. And then you land with two open hips, which prevents your hips from rotating efficiently. We'll go over that again on the back angle. Is that where I have notes on it? Yes, on the back angle. And then you end up rounding and throwing nose up, like everyone else who has ever thrown before you. So pump, back to the pump. So as the X step crosses center, or even before that, the disc is going to start swinging forward. It's going to peak when the X step touches, or really grounds, I guess. And then the disc will only start moving backwards right about here when the plant step starts moving forward. Okay, so demo. So I'm going to skip doing what you do. You know what you do. What I want to see different is disc at center chest in your address position. So initial step, that's 1. X step, 2. That's when your disc is going to swing forward. So just doesn't matter where it ends up, what angle it's on, it'll all get fixed by the time you get back to the hit. But initial step, X step. So now this is your starting line. And now that this foot is going to move forward, the disc is allowed to move backwards. So those happen at the same time. Remember, hanging out here, getting that foot well in front. So that by the time the heel is ready to come down, that's when I would get to maximum rear extension. So that's just a trick, because what I don't want is to rush this, get here and have this be static and then tip, because that does all sorts of bad things. First of all, it's static instead of bouncing off of your rear extension position, which will hurt your power, and it'll also make you want to recruit other muscles that you shouldn't use as much. Like if I have this out here and then pull, it's going to be a pull. It's going to be a lawnmower pull. Whereas if I bounce, it's a lot easier to integrate my whole body into that movement. So hopefully you can just see that. Like if I'm here and I drop my heel and pull, like this part doesn't move very much. But if I'm going dynamically, it's a lot easier for other things to be in play, because I'm really thinking about my body as a counterweight. Like that's the whole name of the channel, Trebuchet Disc Golf, right? My body is my counterweight, that spinning is what starts to create the motion. But it's not the end of the motion. The end of the motion is out on the flingy arm thing, right? Science term, look it up. Okay, so that's the pump. It's really easy to do slowly. It's really difficult to integrate into your throw and actually change it. So what you want to do is try to make your timing too slow, too late, right? So like intentionally, comically leave the disc out here way too late. because that's the only way you're actually going to make it change, right? Is what people do is they're like, okay, I'm going to pump, right? And they cheat it. So just slow down. Don't be goal oriented. Don't worry about how far the disc goes. Don't worry about making it feel right. Make it look stupid, right? Because you're just trying to change something. So it should look like that, where there's like lag time back here, where you're just boom, getting back there. But again, it's getting back, and even if we're being more accurate, getting out, but not drifting behind. This is bad because it puts you in little kid rounding mode, right? Where hand a 5-year-old a disc and say, throw this as hard as you can. And they're going to go, yeah, and throw like that. This is a baseball bat, not a whip. We want a whip that cracks, which means it has to coil up into this position and compress into the elbow joint, and then it'll whip out quickly. We'll go over that on the rounding note. So that's the pump. We talked a little bit about drifting behind. That is super dangerous. It causes rounding. And then let's go over to your plant toe and why that matters. So I'm going to say 99% of players that end up with their X step in this position end up with their plant step too far toe forward. So like here, well, not that far, but like on a 45 or something. So what we actually want is your heel a little bit closer to the target than your toe. So let's see where you get to. You're staying up on the ball with foot is good. Your heel touches down for like an instant, but comes right back up. So that's totally allowed. You've got good athletic motion and movement. We just need to get your body to understand what the plant is supposed to do, what the brace is supposed to do, and what the elbow hinge is supposed to do. And then you will be ripping all the way across that field, no problem. And so your shift looks pretty good until there, like you've started to open your hip a little tiny bit. And then there a lot. And then there you set down maybe 20 degrees in front of 90. And then because of that, your knee is at an angle where, in order to preserve all of our lovely ligaments that are so fragile, that you have to stack the knee on top of the brace. So the knee is directly on top of the foot. That is not what we want. We want the foot out in front. So if your foot was here, we would want your knee here and your hip here. So we want to preserve this angle. I cannot draw lines. We want to preserve this angle and make it as low as possible within reason, so that you can contain your momentum behind the brace. That's where our acceleration comes from, is that you're turning your linear momentum from the walk up rather, into rotational momentum because you're containing it behind this brace. Pretty simple concept, but that is not stressed enough in disc golf coaching currently. So let's look at one more thing to talk about. You have a midfoot pivot, which is not necessarily bad, but it's not optimal. And let's talk about what it indicates. So look at your front foot. Once it starts moving, and then it kind of switches to a toe pivot at the end. So you're not committed to rotating on your heel. You kind of start, there's a little heel movement and then a midfoot movement and then toe movement. So the reason that pressure point shifts is because it's responding to your balance. So here, when you set down, a little tiny bit more of your weight is on your heel. So the first thing that moves is your toe pops up a little bit right there, that frame it just happened. And then as your body weight drifts more centered over that foot, you actually pivot on the midfoot right there. And then as your weight drifts forward more and it's more over your toe, you start to spin on the toe. So you can use where you're pivoting on your foot as an indicator of where your weight is. That's accurate in 95% of situations, probably. So what you're doing is you're opening a little bit too much towards the target, opening your toe a little bit too far towards the target. Then you are still getting down into the heel to where when you pivot, you have a heel pivot, and then you have a midfoot pivot, and then you have a toe pivot. So we want all of that to happen on the heel. And the way we get there is by shifting weight into the heel. So if you keep the heel like a good 2 or 3 inches closer to the target, then all of my weight, all of my pressure has to go into that heel. And now here, my knee is in a much better angle. If I open my knee, I can't, I mean, you can. I just saw a video of a guy doing it that like he planted like this, and I was like, you're screwed. It's never going to work right. But then I watched the back angle of his shot, and he actually did push off of the ground correctly in that orientation somehow and get his front hip to actually move backwards, which you're supposed to do. It's a more advanced thing. We'll worry about that later. But that was new to me. It is possible to do that, but it's way easier and way safer for your knee joint to get to it here. So if all my weight is pouring into that heel, when I go to turn, my heel has to stay stuck to the ground, right? So we want all of our rotation to happen here with the knee behind the heel, the hip behind the knee, and your head should be somewhere above your shin bone, ideally. Look at Drew Gibson when he's at his hit point, kind of sort of here, his back foot is actually floating, but I am not a wizard yet, sadly, so I can't do that. I need to put a handle so that I can be a wizard and do this, right? Because that's where, yeah, we'll get into it. But you wanna be pouring the weight into the heel so that the pivot happens correctly. And it's like people ask, when do I pick up my toe? You don't pick up your toe. All you do is rocking chair into the heel so that when the hit of the brace has happened and something gives, it's going to be the toe that gives because more of your weight's in the heel, right? So you're starting to put weight into the ball and then rocking to the heel so that the transition takes care of itself, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so that's the plant toe, midfoot, pivot, and then your knee. So your knee gets stacked, which is a function of opening the hips. So stand up, try this little drill with me. Open your toes, and then try to do the Elvis Presley drill and just move your hips as far backwards as you can, as far forward as you can. When I do this, I feel like pain, discomfort in my hip joints because they're too open and they don't want to open anymore, right? Like that's kind of the limit of my flexibility. If I try to go farther open than that, it doesn't feel good. So this is not an athletic, explosive position unless we are playing sumo, and then this is the perfect position. Different sport, different rules, but just feel that, right? This is not good for your hips. So now bring your toes to 90 degrees. There we go. Now I've got some more motion in my hips. I can close this hip, looks a lot like a good windup, and I can close this hip, starts to look like a decent brace. Now I'm going to go toes in a little bit. Now I've got even more range of motion and more explosive range of motion. Now take your front foot, offset it. Now that looks like a good brace, right? Because I'm shifting this way so I can contain more of my momentum behind that braced front leg. And if I were to add linear momentum, my rear leg would even continue targetward and get me into a nice hyzer tilt with a counterweight. We'll go over that later. I play with another gentleman who is barrel chested like yourself, and he struggles with the same thing that looks like you're struggling with. So you end up here because there's no room to pull through your chest. So don't worry about this too much yet, but just to foreshadow what we'll go over in the coming weeks or months as you get some of this lower hanging, easier to correct stuff going on. Things that you can use to address not having a lot of chest here because your rib cage is large. Here, the disc doesn't have any room, right? So I can do this and get more room, just tilting the disc, inside edge of the disc down, or suitcasing the disc, right? Drew Gibson does that a lot. Of very solid pros do this. Some guy, Iceberg TV, I think his channel is, just pulled a video of Gannon saying you should do this. And I think that is absolutely on point. So I'll get you a link to that video. Get notes of that. Gannon suitcase vid. Check. So that's one thing you can do to make more space, is just tilt the disc down. It adds a complication because now the disc is not where you want it to be, and you have to get it back at the right time. So I had avoided suggesting that to people, but if Gannon thinks it works, then it probably works because he's doing okay. So that's option one. Option two is if you want more chest space, right? Kind of the same thing. Now there's more space here because I've gotten my chest out away from the disc a little more. So I wouldn't play with those too much. For now, just let your arm stick out. Let your elbow stick out a little more. And focus on, we're going to talk about this in the rounding section, but focus on getting the disc more to here. So you kind of stop the disc towards your rear shoulder and turn, and then your arm is a baseball bat, right? Instead of a whip getting compressed. So you need to pull the disc to here. That'll get you a lot more power. Yeah, well, we're at rounding, so I should just do that. That's the basis of it, is just, you're just trying to get to here. So there's a drill on the channel. You look for deep pocket, it should pop up. But basically all we need to fix your rounding problems is, if you want to understand what rounding is, go look at the videos on the channel. There's a really old one of the first ones I did, called On Rounding. That'll give you a good overview. And then the deep pocket drill is kind of my current fix for that. And also the trebuchet drill is an excellent one for understanding what rounding is and how to not do it. But all we really care about, if we want to not round, is your reach back position and your pocket position and how we get between them. So your reach back position should be offset, not reaching straight back away from the target, but reaching back and out. So again, disc drift is this way, reaching out is this way. So this is preserving space here in my shoulder joint, right? This is collapsing space in my shoulder joint. Once I'm collapsed, it's very difficult to drive the elbow out fast enough to get to a deep pocket. If I'm here, I'm kind of setting myself up for success of being able to drive the elbow forward like the trebuchet drill and keep this space here. A lot of folks have coached that it needs to stay at 90 from your reach back to your throw. But if you look at any pro throw ever far, that's not what's happening. They're more open, and then they come in a little bit and come more open again. So 90 is a good place to get to if you're having a rounding issue like you are having, but it's not the end goal. So let's just skip that and get to where we want to be. So all we care about is reaching out and back. This will feel less powerful at first, because it is. This is power because you're swinging a big, heavy baseball bat around. This is not power because all you're doing is loading your whip, right? You're just doing that. It's not going to feel powerful, but the disc will go faster when you do it right. So reaching out and back, and then supporting the shoulder in such a way that when I start to turn, this space here does not collapse. So I'm actually intentionally driving my elbow forward. I'm doing this. I'm not doing this, right? I'm not going all the way around. I'm just pumping from here to there. And then it's not that I'm trying to stop here, but I'm trying to stop pushing here. So I'm just going and then letting it go, right? And that's what I'm talking about getting the finger whip, is you can do this here and get that little, do it by my microphone, you can probably hear the whoosh. But there's a little right there. And I'm not moving fast. It's the multiplication of all of this rotation happening when my elbow is from here to here, right? It's compressing all of that to the end. Whereas if I move the whole assembly at once, there's no multiplication because I'm not getting a lever action from the elbow. So that's all that matters. It's really that simple. Just reach out and back, drive the elbow forward and get to here, and then let everything go, which there isn't anything else you could do besides try to be more tense and tricep rip it out. That will happen at an elite level. There's no reason for anyone throwing under 400 feet to worry about beto drill tricep push. It's just silly. Okay, so that's enough on rounding. So let's hop over to your other video, but first, there's more. So I said you had really good athletic motion, and what I mean is like this little forward step is very much in balance. So with all the things you're doing not super ideally correct, you still have good motion. That's the most important thing. It's very hard for me to teach you how to move well athletically. It's very easy for me to teach you to understand these mechanical components that you haven't happened to understand yet because they're very abstract and difficult. Okay, so that's all my notes on your first video. Let's go to the second one. So this is the shot that made me jealous. Like if that's your driveway and you can just walk out your front door and do that, that is awesome. Okay, so here we can see the rounding a little better. I'll let it play a time or two just for context and see that disc drift behind. But you get a good rip out. Like the disc does the little flip thing and it comes out of your hand. So again, like natural athleticism, you understand parts of it, but other parts of it, you've got to level up. So here we can see how the footwork contributes to the rounding. So there, everything's good. Now, as the X step starts to come forward, we would want to see the disc pump forward as well. So now you're starting to shift weight onto your X step. Watch your hips and your shoulders as I play. So the hips are going to turn in a line towards the camera, and then an instant later, the shoulders are going to turn in a line towards the camera. And I'm going to pause when that's done. Like, already missed it. So because this foot is pointed back and you've shifted weight onto that foot, the hips have mostly matched that, and the shoulders have mostly matched that. And we want to get to your peak reach back position, which you're basically in right now. We want to get there when your heel actually engages the ground. So your toe is going to set down here, your heel is going to set down here, and that instant when your heel hits down is when we would want to get to this peak reach back position. So you'll probably get this because it looks like you are an athlete and have done some other sports. And I think I mentioned this before. We don't want to get to the reach back and then stay there and then pull forward. So it's the same thing, like if I'm trying to do a high jump, right? I don't want to load, stay loaded, let all the energy I built here dissipate, and then jump. You can actually get like an extra 4 to 6 inches if you load dynamically. So this is, in sports physiology, this is called the stretch shortening reflex or the stretch shortening cycle. Don't know why they named it that. It doesn't make any sense to me. But the idea is that I can take momentum, load it into my tendons and my muscles, and as long as I don't wait for that to dissipate, I can bounce off of that and get more height. The same thing happens on your reach back. That's what Coach T was getting at with his whole slingshot double move thing, right? Is adding power by dynamically bouncing off of the rear of your arm movement. He was just talking about the arm, is my understanding, but the same thing applies to your core. So if I rotate my core back, get my disc out here, and then pull everything forward, that's going to be one power level. If I rotate my core, dynamically bounce off the rear extension, which requires containment on this foot, so I can't do that if I'm here. If I'm here, I don't have any containment, everything just spills out the back. If I can coil against this foot and I have a stop that I can then press off of a little bit, not explode, just press, then I can get a dynamic bounce of my whole body, and that's where this offhand starts to make sense and contribute by bringing the body weight back into center so that it can rotate quicker. Yeah, so that's the first thing I see on the back angle. Yeah, so the hips and shoulders align to the foot, so make sure the foot is where we want it. And this makes your reach back static and not dynamic. So then next from here, the disc drift idea. So let's see where your disc is. Perfect circle that I have drawn there. So that's a lot of movement. And the disc is moving away from having a path forward. So you're actually released out here. So the disc is here, going this way, and then coming back out here. So we kind of want that shape, but we want it in a different place. So ignoring what's on the screen, we'll go up here. So if your torso is right here, your shoulders are going to move during this, but you want your reach out and back to be here, and then the disc is basically going to come in on that line. Your elbow is going to bend to a classic 90-90 power pocket, where then the disc will end up here. But that's not really your power pocket. You really want your power pocket to be with your elbow poking out here. And this is where you run into issues with you don't have enough room because of the size of your rib cage to make this work. So then we have to get into the hyzer lean and suitcasing the disc so that you can get this elbow bend here very tight without the disc hitting your pecs. But anyways, the point is we're going from out to in and then to back out. I won't stress the out too much right now because there's already too many things to work on. But you don't want to, ultimately, you don't want to release with the disc here because then it'll go too far right. And you're not doing this. Like, you already have a good intuitive understanding that you release the disc here and it goes that way. So you'll probably do this correctly on purpose. But when you start doing the, what's it called? The deep pocket drill. It's totally fine to start, if I'm throwing towards the camera, it's totally fine to start thinking about flicking water off of my hand. I'm going to flick it directly towards the camera. I'm going to flick it straight forward because that allows you to it encourages you to get to this deep pocket, right? And then go out that way. Then where it gets harder is you don't want to release here, because if I release here, the disc is going to go too far right. So you actually need to go from 12 o'clock to 11 o'clock to 10 o'clock, and you really want to release here. It's the most counterintuitive thing in the world, but all you need to change is the timing of your pump. So like I said, I was pumping from here to here, right? You just mentally change that you're not trying to end up there towards the target. You're trying to send all of your energy to 10 o'clock. So it's not here, it's there. And that's happening while you're spinning dynamically on a hyzer tilt. It's a lot of stuff, but once you understand it, you can trick your body into doing it right, and once you feel it a couple times, it's a game changer. You'll have a ton more speed on the disc for way less energy, and it'll be way more consistent. Okay, so that was my first point, and we went over disc drift. Feel like you've got that. So the disc drifting behind you just makes the deeper pocket thing harder. Makes it easier to round, harder to get to a good deep pocket. So the other thing we can see here is how your plant step. Wow, I'm way over time. Awesome. Your plant step affects all of the things. So because you've turned too far backwards too early, your body knows that. In order to get any power, it has to turn your hips back towards the target. So that starts happening here. Like there, that was a big shift. You went into that sumo stance. But then your right knee continues to drift forward. And that's a function of your foot placement. So your right knee just drifts the whole time. And again, good motion, good dynamic balance. Like this looks very good, but you're spinning out too much. So just a little shift of getting your heel forward. So move the toe back to here and leave the heel right where it is. And then your hip won't open until you've really slammed into the ground, and this leg will start moving to counterbalance. You don't have to do that. It'll just do it because you've stopped the front side correctly. And then your knee will actually extend and push your front hip back more. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but just a little teaser. And there's another video I did recently that's, I forget what it's called, how to add power with something brace. I'll get you a link to that one too. But when you open, it makes your brace mushy because your body is going to continue to throw that knee to keep all the rotation from happening in the knee. It rotates the knee. You don't want rotation in your leg. You want rotation in your hip joint. So when I get the toe down and the heel in front with my knee bent, now as my weight shifts, again, keeping my center of gravity and my aligned spine behind my brace, this way from my brace. Now, when I load into that knee, and when I start to unload, that's what makes my rotation happen. So this hip actually goes backwards. Like, you're athletic enough, I think you'll get this intuitively. Your body will just do it once you get the heel in front. So once you drop weight into that heel, your body will know that it needs to extend that leg to resist the momentum. And then the rotation will happen by folding into this crease. So that's way too much to start with, but hopefully that'll make sense. Ask questions if it doesn't. Thank you, sir. We'll see you next time.